Great. Thanks, Noelia. Thanks for inviting me to do this live demo. It's very exciting. I guess I've brought along a sketchbook that I keep. I actually have several sketchbooks on the go at any one time, but I usually keep a very small one, an A6 sort of size, which is half this size, for when I'm out and about. So I like to keep a small one on me so I can draw if I'm drawing on location and so on. And this one's a bit of a mix. This one's a bit of drawing on location, but also drawing from photos and drawing from still life at home as well. And it was one I kept over the pandemic sort of lockdown period. So it's got a bit of a mix of things in it. But this one, actually the three I was going to show you are all actually drawn on location. So this one is a place in London called Covent Garden. I don't know if many of our viewers know Covent Garden, but it's a very popular place in central London. And this is an area called Seven Dials. There's actually seven roads that come off this area. For this, I only use two pens. It's one with a thin nib and one with a thicker nib to get the blacks, which is what I'm going to be doing today. And then again, this is similar. This is on location within Covent Garden, just a quick standing up sketch of the shops, a couple of shops there. And I think this was just a 30-minute quick doodle. Mm-hmm. And similarly, this is another on location, but this one is not far away, just in Soho. So is essentially where the London Theatre District is on Shaftesbury Avenue. And this one you probably recognise, it's got Les Miserables was playing here, but obviously it was all closed during the pandemic period. So it was all closed up here, even though it was quite busy because it just opened up from lockdown, and so lots of people were out and about.
Yeah, I can see the little people, they have some kind of movement in them, the way you drew that. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
So what are we doing today?
So today we're going to stick with London, and we're going to sketch. This is the scene here. I've got it on my iPad. Hopefully you've all got it from the link. This is it's a road called Glasshouse Street, and right at the end here is this little pub called the Glass Blowers, and so we're going to be drawing this, and you can see there's some people in it. So we'll be showing you how to do, or how I normally depict people in these types of sort of city scenes. And people are actually really useful when you want to use them to help gauge scale and perspective as well. So I'll be showing you how I typically do that as well. And the sketch that I produced earlier, which this one doesn't have color, we're going to add a bit of color to it in a second. But this is the one that I did before. So you can see, again, it's just using two pens, a thin and a thick nib, and it doesn't really matter what. I mean, I'm using the Etchr 0.2 today, and this one is the Etchr. It's a chisel nib. Ooh, can you see that? So it's a chisel tip, which I really like because it helps me fill in blacks quite quickly, but also it's got the thin edge to it, so you can use that, to be it's quite flexible, if you like, and you can do kind of a few things with the one pen. So I tend to, when I'm out and about as well, and typically even when I'm at home, I don't like to use lots of pens, unless I'm doing something really super detailed. I kind of try and keep it simple, especially when you're out and about. You don't really want to be carrying a lot with you, so
yeah.
So awesome. Shall we get started?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay, so I've got this this lovely Etchr sketchbook, which is great because it's got lovely thick paper, and it's we're going to be using a bit of watercolour on it afterwards, and it doesn't buckle, so it's hot press whereas obviously some of my other sketchbooks are not not made for watercolor use. So what I typically do to begin with, and actually because I've been doing it quite a long time now, what I do is I actually imagine it in my head. But this might be a really good tip for people who are just starting out. So the first thing I would do is actually I'll use my finger, and it sounds strange. I use my finger to imagine I'm drawing on the page, and it kind of helps me set out a bit of size, and so I know what I want to draw, and I'm not going to be drawing it too big so that it goes off the page and I can't fit it in. So I kind of, imagine what would I start with and where would it sit on the page. And you can see in this photo, we've got, the main focus being the glass blower pub, is it just sort of sits just off center, so that it sort of sits towards the right hand side, and is a little bit lower as well because we've got quite a lot of sky up here, and then we've got the sort of the road running up to it. So we've got that nice little bend that we're going to put in a second. So it gives you a bit of an idea as to how big you should start plotting it. And then when I first started drawing, and I don't always do this anymore because I can kind of imagine it in my head, but I am going to draw it for you today. When I first started drawing, what I would do is I would start to plot in the horizon line. So what that starts to look like is this. So I'll do it quite lightly, and I might do it with little dots, so it's not a fat solid line, but actually you can draw a solid line if you like. So the horizon line is, sometimes it's known as the eye line. Not very straight, but that doesn't matter because you're hoping that you're not going to really notice it afterwards. And the eye line is, so it's different depending on where you're viewing it from. So for example, your eye line, if you were sitting down, would be lower than your eye line if you were standing up. So it's important to know that actually everyone we see in this photo now is at a standing up position. And actually I was standing up when I took this photo. So my eye line is going to be at everyone's standing up height. So why I do this is because this helps me get a sense of perspective and scale. So I'm going to show you what I do when I try and gauge scale using this eye line and people. So for example, I'm going to start plotting in this little person in white. You can see this person in white wearing jeans, just outside the door of the pub. And there's a couple of people sort of walking down the street. Now, as the people, you can see the people that are closer to you, obviously they're a bit bigger because they're closer to you. And you can see how the way I'm plotting it out is that their eye line, the eyes, where their eyes sit, are always on that same line. So if I started to do it here, you see this little man here by the car, but for example, if there's someone walking towards me, they would end up looking like that because they're much closer to me, so therefore they would look bigger, but essentially the head and the eyes are going to be roughly in the same place as everybody else. So it's really the body getting bigger and the legs falling down lower on your page. So you can see even in this, there's a sense of perspective happening. When you look at it, even without the buildings, you can see that this person on the right is much, is closer to me than the person in the middle there that is sort of much smaller and further away. And that's how you get a sense of perspective using people. So this starts to become my little gauge. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw the front of the pub. So you see where the front door is, and I'm going to plot it in here. So I've got this little person in white, and I know that actually it's going to look something like this, because we've got this nice flat front. So when I start a drawing, I tend to try and pick the longest straight line possible, and I kind of plot that in. What's really nice about this view is that frontage of the pub is literally flat on, so it's like we're looking at it, straight on. There's no odd angles or perspectives to that front face that you see with the door and the 3 windows. So we're going to start with that one, keep it quite easy. So you can see here, I've drawn in roughly where it finishes. I'll draw in roughly where the door is based on where my lady is stood. And the door's quite big, so I'm going up in size here. And it's something like that, you can see. So we're gonna fill that in later. We'll worry about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a little curve above the door, so I'm just gonna scribble that in. And then there's a light there and an architectural detail. So there you go. You've already got that front part of the pub sort of doodled in, so you know roughly how big to draw everything else. So what's the next part? The next part would be, I'm going to keep going upwards, and I can see that actually the blue part where the window is on the front of that building is kind of roughly the same size as where the door is. So I'm going to draw it in like that. I'm drawing a little window. This window is quite sweet. It's got little plants hanging off it. And again, let's not worry about filling in for now. Let's just try and map it in. Then there's a bit of an architectural detail, so I'm just going to draw that with a couple of lines. And the next chunk is this sort of white face. And again, this window here. So we'll just drop that little window in. And we'll fill in the blacks in a minute when we get our nice fat chisel pen out. And then the last one here. So again, kind of almost like adding building blocks. And it's the sort of, you know, this is quite nice because you can see the architectural details are almost giving us little squares or building blocks to work from. So that's the way I view it. So there we go. We've already got the front of that piece drawn. And then there's, you know, there's a little angle here before we start getting into a little bit more detail, which looks something akin to this. And then essentially you have your roof. So that's already one side of your building done.
Nice.
And then what's important about this line here is that this is going to start helping us gauge how we draw these little angles. So for example, this one here, so everything below that line, that first line we drew, should be heading up towards the line. So for example, this line should be heading up towards it. It doesn't start dipping below it because the building's moving away from us. It's got, it's in perspective essentially. So that one's dipping down like that towards our eye line. Now, these ones, which are a bit further up, they almost have to dip a bit more. They're not quite straight. They're not quite as horizontal, if you like, because they're trying to reach that eye line, if you like. So it's looking something like this. And there's also a really good way of using people to measure things as well. If you can't do it by eye, what you can do is you can, if you use your finger, like your fingers like this, or you use a pen, you can measure the height of the person that you drew. So this person stood right by the front door, measuring her there. You can actually measure how many of that person is actually going to make up the height of this building, and you just count them. And you do the same thing on your photo, or you do the same thing in real life when you're there from your sitting position. And it gives you a bit of a gauge as to how you can start plotting out the building blocks of your drawing. But we don't need to go into that today. I think we can just keep it quite simple with without doing a lot of measuring, and just doodle in these windows. You get a sense of the windows getting slightly bigger as they come closer towards you. So as they come closer towards this chunk here, and a bit smaller there. And it's not a huge amount, but all of that will help give you a sense of perspective. So they're getting a little bit taller as we get closer to us. So all these little tricks are what you need to remember if you want to try and get a sort of relatively accurate drawing, a sense of perspective and scale within your drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, and I'm keeping this quite fast and loose as well, because I do think there's a certain charm to drawing things quickly and not dwelling too much on the details. I do love detailed things, sketches as well, but you don't always have to do that. So you can see now I'm trying to marry up. I'm looking at the architectural detail in the roof, and I'm trying to marry that up there so that I can finish the end of that building. And then I've got this nice little sign above the pub.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some windows here at low level as well. So there's windows sort of here, there's something there, and there's something quite dark. It's quite difficult to see because it's quite far away, but that doesn't matter because you don't need to draw in all the details like we just said. Just draw what you can see, because if you were there drawing it in real life, it'd be a very similar thing in that you wouldn't be able to see it all because you're not close enough.
Mm-hmm.
So drawing what you see will help you not labor over those details and make it feel sort of a little bit more unrealistic in many ways. So here we go. I'm just doodling in this little shop front next to it. You can see I'm not drawing in a lot, but I am sort of trying to mark out where those deep shadows are.
And that's why you're making the darker lines.
Yeah. This pen's quite good because you can press quite hard on it, and then, and it gives you much harder, darker line, thicker line, but you can go in quite lightly like this as well. So, I'm just gauging where the top of this second building is, and I'm just plotting in the roof, and I'm using the windows of the pub to first gauge that. So here, there you go. So getting in, that's the second building, and then I'm just quickly marking in the third building as well, so you can see how quickly we can start to fill the page, and just plot all these little bits in for us to use the thicker pen later to bring a bit of life to it. So we've done one side of the pub. Oh, hang on a second. I think what I'll do is I'll just draw in these little windows so you can see what we've done. And there's 3 windows in this pub next to, on the building next to the pub. So you can see I've just created these 3 little dots because it's just given me little markers to draw them in. So do something like this, and you can see, there you go. So there's 3 little windows there. And we'll do the same thing here. So 3 little windows, 1, 2, 3. And they're going to end above this sign that I've doodled in. So do something like this.
I've noticed you do a lot of little dots before you actually mark your lines.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So I do them as little markers because they kind of help me locate where things go. So, for example, if I'm drawing now the right-hand side of the pub, and it is a tricky shape because it's sort of angled, this pub. So I'm now going to do a little dot here, which helps give me a sense of where it ends, and then I fill it in like that. And I'll do the same thing here. So you can see, do something like that, and you can see where I try and marry that. And I think it's just become a habit where I'll draw in these little lines or dots to help me visualize where I'm going to plot the next element. So this one goes here, and you can see they're quite wobbly lines as well, but I think that's okay.
They still convey that it's a building.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the more confident you get with sketching, the more, you can get accurate lines, even if they wobble a little bit, because it's more about the placement of it rather than how straight you can get your lines. If the line is actually along the right angle and it's in the right place, it still looks right, if you like, when you're looking at the drawing, even if it's wobbly. I quite like a wobbly line because I think it has a certain charm to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always sort of saying to people, don't worry, if you make mistakes. You can see I'm making mistakes, but I'm just carrying on. Because again, making the mistakes part of the charm as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think people I know a lot of beginners tend to panic about making mistakes and when to start again. But I often find that if you continue, it ends up much better than you'd first imagined. And so yeah, it's not always the case, but that's kind of trial and error. I think it's important to keep pushing through and keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
And you often surprise yourself. It turns out all right. So you can't really see that past window there, so I'm not going to draw that. I love drawing urban scenes because I love all the signage and bits of street furniture that you get everywhere. So we're going to be drawing some of these lampposts in a second, and I'm drawing in the little pub sign here. And you can see the same thing will apply, because these windows that I'm drawing right now, they're a bit closer to me than the windows at the end. Mm-hmm. So these ones back here, so they're slightly bigger, slightly taller, and as we move down they get a bit smaller. So again, just trying to convey that sense of perspective without going over top, without having to measure everything. Mm-hmm. That's just a good way of remembering what you're supposed to be doing.
So basically same concepts you applied when you were doing the people at the beginning.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. So there's a lamppost here, and I did draw this person in to sort of show you what I was talking about. I think it's actually a Deliveroo driver. I think it's a Deliveroo. It looks like he's delivering some food, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So the lamppost is sort of disappearing behind him. We're just going to leave it like that. But I love all these little signs that you see. So we won't be able to see all the traffic signs there, but I'm going to doodle some of those in. And then there's this lovely street lamp. So it's quite traditional, this lamp here.
Yeah. By the way, we have quite some action going on in the chat.
Okay.
Alvin Tong popped in. He said hi.
Hi.
Leslie also popped in and said chai. Said hi. And Lillian Joy says, thanks for the tips on perspective.
Oh, good.
And
I hope they're helpful.
Yeah, they've been saying it's really helpful. And Jane Simpson said, this is such a wonderfully clear explanation of what you are doing in this drawing. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So we're on to the canopy. So you can see here, this got some lovely blacks. I'm going to get quite excited in a minute, I think, when I get the black, when I get the chisel tip out, because I can see there's some lovely blacks under here. And I'll talk about how the blacks can give us some contrast in a second, but I'm going to leave that for now. Just going to put the canopies in. So hopefully if you're drawing at home, you've got the little canopies. And I've got a post box here. So this is our traditional London, well, not just London, British post box. I'm going to put the little British post box in. Now you won't see it in red because we're not going to color that in, but I want to doodle him in as well. Now, before I start tackling the street, what I would like to do is just try and get in this left-hand side here, so that we almost try and frame the drawing that we're doing.
Okay.
And I'm not going to put too much detail into this building on the left here, because I want the hero to be the pub. So that's our pub there. So I want the eye to be drawn to the pub. So I'm going to spend most time sort of focusing on the pub. And here, I love these. I love picking views where we have these very tall buildings on the edge that start to frame the view. So for example, you know, there's the one that's popping up on this right-hand side, which you won't see, but this one starts to give us a real sense of, again, this kind of scale of the buildings, those lovely old buildings in London looming over. And we have such a lovely mishmash of scales in London. We've got plenty to play with. So the way I start to just sort of map in the rest of the drawing is I keep moving towards the left. So I go, I'll think, right, okay, I've got the pub here. We've got the building next to it with the 3 little windows. And then there's the little slither that I can see here. And they're really tiny windows, but I'm going to just do this. So you can see the really tiny windows have gone in. And then behind it, there's kind of there's another building that's got this lovely, almost pinky facade, almost soft pinky facade appearing. And I'm going to just drop him in there behind our 3rd building. So we're on our 4th building now, guys. This is how quickly we can do lots of buildings.
Yeah, with only, 30 minutes. And
yeah,
we've tackled 1, 2, 3, now 4
buildings, right? Yeah, we're on the 4th one. So this one's got a lovely, not quite a parapet, but I can't remember what the architectural name is for this element. We're just going to do lemon, and it just dips behind our pub. So we'll pop that in. And then it's got this nice little bit here, that not too tall. We don't want him to overwhelm the pub. He certainly doesn't in the photo, so we have to be careful of that. And he's got these lovely 2 windows there. So we'll get the chisel tip on that in a second. But for now, we'll just drop him in. Then we've got, it's got a quite interesting little, I think that probably got a sign above it, probably a date or something, the date the building was built, perhaps. See there, I can't quite see what it says, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But then there's a piece above him, so I'm going to make sure I just plot him in. And again, keep this quite loose. We're trying not to put too much detail into this piece because we don't want to overwhelm the pub. And we don't want to draw the viewer's attention away from the pub as well, because the pub is our main piece here. And so that's what we've chosen to hero today. I think it's quite important if you're doing this type of drawing to think about what is it that I want. Well, actually, with any drawing, sorry, I should have, well, with any drawing, to think about what is it that I want the viewers or anyone that's viewing this drawing, look at this drawing afterwards. What do I want them to see? Is it that I want them to, see all the hustle and bustle with the people? Do I want to draw more attention to the people? Or do I want them to focus on these, the lovely new contemporary buildings in the back? Or do I want them to focus on my pub? And we've talked about focusing on the pub here, so that's what we're going to do. So therefore, really lightly just dropping in the rest of the architectural details we can see in the photo. So keeping it quite quick again, not worrying about making mistakes. And just popping in my little windows. Anyone that actually follows me on Instagram knows that I love a window. And I sort of tend to count them to help me get it. It really helps me with scale, actually, counting windows in the same way that, I was talking about measuring people, the height of people. So counting windows is also a good way of doing it, because we know we've got a certain number of windows to reach a certain height. And so it's a good way of keeping track in case you sort of lose where you are on your drawing.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
So if we're drawing some big skyscrapers, that that gets quite tricky, but it's often a lot of windows. But it's a really good way of keeping track of where you are. So I'm using the windows at the moment. I'm measuring these windows up against the windows of the building next to it. So each time I add another building, I'm sort of measuring one building against the next. So that's how I'm building up my jigsaw puzzle of this mishmash of buildings that we're capturing here.
So does that mean you're finding reference points within what you previously drew to add new ones?
Yeah, exactly. So because I know I've moved on now from which building is this? The pub?
Fifth.
1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on to the 5th building, which is the modern building with the blue blue framework and the glazing. And it's right hidden, at the back of the street now. So we're going deep in. So I know I can see from the photo that it's got these lovely big window panes, and I'm just measuring it against this 4th building here. So I'm going, okay, well, I know this blue framework, it touches this point here. It's not taller than the building itself. And it's got, I can see quite a straight line for the window panes that dips down like that. And then essentially we've got to the building on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So I just keep using the buildings I've drawn previously as these reference points, like you said earlier. And I move from there, and I keep building up the drawing in this way. And I know a lot, this is just how I do it. It's not obviously how everyone else does it necessarily. A lot of people like to map out the whole drawing beforehand as a sort of a skeleton, and then go in and fill in the details. I think it depends on what I'm drawing. I do that sometimes, but predominantly I'm drawing like this, and I'm using what I've drawn already as reference point. And the reason it helps doodling it with my finger invisibly beforehand is because essentially I'm mapping it out with my finger in my head. So that's kind of making sure that I don't, draw it too big, run out of space, or don't get to capture the thing I wanted to capture in the first place.
Right. That
kind of thing. So you can see here now we've got to the building on the left. So it's quite an exciting, it's quite a beautiful building, isn't it? So he goes right the way up here, and we're going to just take him up a little bit. And again, I'm using it, the reference point, to the top of this roof that we've drawn of this lovely sort of pale pinky building here. And I can see maybe I've drawn that line too tall, but that doesn't matter, because I can see roughly, he's got this big architectural detail that pokes out like that. And this is going to take me back in, and then I can continue that line to form that window at the top, see? So quite often you find that you think you made a mistake, but you can actually build that into your sketch, or I don't want to say hide it, because I think it's part of it, but you can build that into your sketch, and it becomes, part of the overall. So that's why I always say don't panic if you think you've made a mistake. Just keep going and see what happens. So we've got some lovely rooftops in London.
Oh yes.
And there's this lovely little fencing detail up here, like a railing. So I'm just going to tickle in a little railing here. Not too much detail. Again, it's got this lovely cross that goes through it. Okay, and then just trying to understand what happens in this sort of quite deep shadow. I think it's quite a lot of architectural complexity to this that I'm definitely not going to focus on, because like I said, we're just going to just going to try and represent it quite loosely so that we can make sure we're focusing on the pub primarily. So then I'm coming back down here, and you can see this line kind of extends all the way down. And I'm drawing this in so you can see that I'm drawing that face of the building. But typically what I do is I won't necessarily draw all of that. I might do sometimes, but what I usually do is I would just literally go in and start drawing these elements here before going on to the next. So similar to how we built up this first stack. So I'm drawing, quite conscious that I've picked up a set of buildings with lots of arched windows in them. They can be quite tricky, can't they?
Yeah, but I guess practice helps you get them down easier.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's that if you understand the basics of how perspective drawing works, it's so much easier to understand what it is that you should be putting down on your page, because even with arches, you know, there's a lot of perspective that you have to pay attention to make sure it feels realistic. I guess we could go into that on another time.
Yes. Just curious, will you be talking a little bit more about perspective during your mini workshop with us?
Yes, yeah. So I've picked a view of Venice, which was it's a beautiful place, isn't it? It's from my photo archives of when I was there a year ago, just before the pandemic, and we're going to be looking at perspective. It's a 1-point perspective, but it's not as straightforward as that because it's got these lovely windy elements to it. And we're going to be looking at how to capture water as well, the canal. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
So if you are interested in learning more from Siu-Lan and her art making process, I would like to encourage you to sign up for her mini workshop happening on September 4th. Will be dropping that link in the chat so that you can sign up for it and support her. And it's about $6 for you to participate. It's limited seating, so make sure you grab your spot. And we have a question in the chat. Will you be adding shading to your drawing today?
So today, we're actually going to keep it quite limited. What we're going to do is use the chisel tip, and we're going to add in all the very deep blacks for shade, and then potentially a couple of other bits, but we're going to keep it quite graphic, if you like. So just filling in the blacks and just showing you how that can actually have a real, you know, strong effect on creating depth, even with just solid blacks, without all the other sort of various degrees of shading that we tend to use quite a lot. So I mean I love doing shading work, but I think for this quick demo, wanted to keep it very purist, if you like, and I quite like the graphic feel of just doing a line and then a solid black, and then potentially adding a little bit of color, a flash of color we're going to do afterwards. So you can see I'm just dropping in the rest of the windows, and again I'm trying to use the reference points of the building next to it that I've just drawn, very loosely dropping those in, and we can look at how we add the blacks to that later. And then there's a doorway here. I can't quite see what's going on, but there are some solids and some nice columns that I think you go into that lead into this doorway. It's a few people, so I'm going to go back to my little line, that's my little line. I know where the head should be, because roughly that is where everyone's head should be, unless you're a little child. So with your little child, I mean, you can tickle in little, you can put little children in as well. And we tend to do that a lot if we're sort of showing designs at work and so on. There's a car as well behind here. I'm going to draw that. And I'm going to use this person I've drawn as reference. So the little van behind him is just below his head, you can see, which means it's sort of underneath this eye line. So that's how you use that as a gauge. Here, as you can see, some little black tires, and there we go. So we've got that in. And then there's also some cars in front. So I think we're going to have a go at drawing them in as well. So again, they're quite low down because they're closer to us and they're further away from those two chaps are walking along that we've just drawn. And so just loosely drawing in this black car here, and I'm not very good at recognizing cars, so someone will have to tell me what car it is, but
so if you know what kind of car it is, let us know in the chat. So is your main media pen? One of our viewers is asking. Sorry? One of your viewers is asking if your main media is pen.
Yes, it is. It's mainly pen. It is now anyway. I used to do a lot more painting and pencil work, but I just really love using pen. I find it really easy to just have about me on the person, and you know, it means I can really do little drawings wherever I am. So yeah, I kind of tend to stick to pen nowadays, but I do deviate.
Okay.
When I get bored or I want to try something different, I do pick up other things and try that as well. And go back to some painting, just when I used to do that a lot when I was younger. So, okay, I'm just going to draw this little detail in here, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to count these little column elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it starts from here. And I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's about right, because this is not the same thing. This looks something like that.
So this is like you would count windows, but you're counting parts of other elements?
Yeah, you can apply it to anything you want, really, if there's repetition, and that often helps. So, and of course, if you do get it wrong, it's not the end of the world, because if you're capturing the essence of it, you have to remember it's not a photograph. And if there is an extra one that you've managed to squeeze in there somehow mistakenly, it really isn't the end of the world.
Right. And no one's going to look at your drawing and actually count them.
And go, oh my goodness, she's added an extra brick in there. What's she doing? Yeah, but I like to do it because, again, like I said, it helps me with my scale, and helps me make sure I'm sort of getting everything I need on the page and so on. So it's helpful, but it's not the end of the world if you do get it wrong. So what I really like about this photo is also the fact that it's got this kind of windy street behind it, and I quite like that we can be quite playful with that. So I'm going to try and capture that once I've drawn this in. So it kind of starts behind the car here, and it really kind of quite a sharp turn to the left. So something like that. And you can be, actually what I tend to do, that was quite slow because I think I was sort of trying hard to talk through it, but what I find works really well is actually just being quite quick with it. So you've got a really lovely fluid line, you know, it's a big swoosh. So we're going to try and be a bit quicker with the second one here. So starts right at the back here, goes past the pub, and it does something like that. And what's also really nice is the fact that there's quite a lot of shadows, and I like working with shadows. And because we're not going to be shading this today, I thought what I could do is just doodle in where these shadows live, something like that. So moving very quickly onto the chisel.
Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, so biggest black area I can see at the top here is this building at the back. So I'm really going for it now. I'm just going in quick, scribbling away, doing something like that. And then it's got really deep shadows in this. I think, I don't know, maybe it's an office building, I'm not quite sure. Really deep shadows in there, so you can fill that in. And then literally what I'm doing is I'm going through the whole, I'm looking through the photo, and I'm going through the whole drawing, and I'm just scribbling in the blacks. So under the car here, there's something going on here, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's quite dark, so I'm going to scribble that in. There's something in these windows. Let's make sure we get these windows popping. And hopefully you can all see. So there's definitely these windows here we want to try and fill in. So I'm leaving, you can see I've drawn in the little mullions there, but I'm going to try and leave a little white gap to represent those window mullions, so you can see the window panes. And the same here. So I'm not going to fill in right up to the line, because I want to make sure I've got that little bit of white. Oh, a little bit over there. Got a bit carried away. A little bit of white flashing through, and I forgot to draw the mullions in here, but we can pretend, we can picture that in our mind's eye and just fill it in like that. And then we've got this lovely dark doorway, as you can see here. So behind our little lady in the white, I'm just going to doodle that in there. There's quite a lot of street furniture, which I haven't actually drawn, so I'll quickly draw that in, actually, because I quite like this little sign. I think it's like a no cycling, no entry, maybe no cycling or something. There's a little little signpost. So little signpost here, and there's a little bollard, which is really black. And then we get to this bit under the canopy, which is that really exciting bit here that I was talking about earlier. We're just going to fill that in, because there's some really deep shadows in this, and we want to make sure we're getting in the shadows to bring that sense of depth. Really helps your drawing achieve a sense of realism with that depth. What else have we got? Where else have we got blacks? I'm sort of running through it all and just filling it in. Some blacks on this side, so we'll go here, that as well. It's a little sign, don't want to colour in the sign. That's why the chisel tip is really good, because you can be quite loose and get a lot of energy with it. I quite like the quality of the line you can get with it. Just moving quite quickly, cover quite a lot of space quite quickly. Quite a lot of paper. So then
leaving the street shadows.
Might leave the street shadows, actually. Yeah, I'll leave the street shadows, because I don't want to draw too much attention to them, but I just thought there's something really lovely about the shapes that you can make with it. So it's worth showing that. And then maybe what we can do is just bring a tiny bit of hatching to this area here. So you've got the sense of, I say hatching, but I'm actually just scribbling quite quickly because I want to keep that energy of it. But I drew this person in earlier to show how I draw people. I'm going to cover him up just to really get a sense of that. So he's gone, but hopefully you get a sense of how deep and far back that goes into that area there. So that's the capture of Glass House Street. And then do we have enough time for me to add a little bit of color?
Yeah, we have another 10 minutes.
Okay, great. It'll be really quick. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but what I thought would be quite fun is I've picked this. Ooh, it's called, I don't even know how to say it, New Gamboge. It's yellow. It's going to have quite a pop to it. And I'm going to just squeeze a little bit into my palette. I've got quite a nice, I've got this brush here, this watercolor brush here, and it's got a nice flat top to it. So I'm going to use this because I'm going to just paint in a bit of sky and just bring in a bit of a bit of sunshine on a dreary day. But I'm going to do it with a very sharp edge. So you can do this with a marker. You can do this with, well, actually you can do it with anything. I like to do this digitally as well because I quite like the bold contrast that you get with the line work.
Would you mind scooching your sketchbook slightly towards you? Perfect. Thank you.
I thought for this, you get lovely with watercolor. Obviously, you get the texture come through, which is really nice. So I'm going to stop it at some point. I'm going to stop it here. So this is why I'm using this brush, because you can get quite a clean, sharp edge to it. So just one color.
So there's a question that was mentioned earlier in the chat that I think would be a great time to ask right now. Where is it? Buddha Crafts asked, do you have any tips on how to finish off the end of your sketches? For example, the edges of the frame so that it doesn't look abrupt or cut off. And I feel like you're kind of doing that with the sky.
Yeah, kind of doing that with this. I guess there's lots of ways you can do it. You can actually draw a frame around it. I like to, if I'm drawing scenes like this, I like to think about what the potential there is in the actual scene itself. So it could be that I use a lamppost, for example, to create that edge. It could be that, you pick the edge of a building, you actually don't draw any of the detail here that we've drawn here, and you use that to create your hard edge, if you like. But yeah, I'm kind of trying to do that a little bit with this color, like you said, Aurelia. So I'm sort of just using it to, rather than frame, if you like, using it to create something that holds these various elements together. And you can see I haven't filled in the shadow and I've just gone up to that line, but I think there's something quite interesting about playing with drawings differently to achieve sort of slightly different effects each time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've drawn this a number of times now, but kind of each time it looks different, and I quite like that. I quite like that because you're always in a different mood when you're drawing as well, and I think that part of it is capturing the mood that you're in.
Yeah.
You're drawing from a photo. If you're drawing from real life, it's capturing the scene that's in front of you and the, you know, the mood, the vibe of that cityscape at that moment. So hopefully that one, this one, oh, actually I might just make this line up. There you go. This one feels a bit sunshiny.
It does.
Quite sunshiny photo, so hopefully that does that. And if you want afterwards, you could add a black outline to that if you feel like it. That could kind of work as well. And you can bleed out with this yellow. So, you know, we could do more, you know, we could do this. There's no hard and fast rules. And I think that's what's lovely about it. You can play to your heart's content.
Yeah.
There we go.
The yellow really helps it pop. And art by Push, I think is how you say it. In the chat saying, someone in the chat just said that the yellow just popped the sketch out.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Good, I'm glad you think so.
Awesome. This was amazing. I have a few more questions for you if you don't mind me asking. So when you draw on site, Buddhacraft is asking, with people and cars moving all the time, do you lock them down first in your sketch?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't actually. I tend to focus on the building that I'm capturing first and foremost, and then I'll think about the people. Cars is a bit trickier. I tend not to do a lot of cars if I'm actually out and about, because they are moving so fast. I just find I can't see what it is I'm drawing, so I tend not to do that. But you can see with my people, it's quite a very loose style, and it's really to convey the essence of people moving about rather than sort of trying to depict the person itself. So I put a lot less detail in that, and they feel kind of quite ethereal and ghostly in their form. But cars I tend not to draw unless they're stationary. So if they're parked there, I'll draw them, but otherwise I won't draw them.
Okay, thanks for sharing. That's good, I think, to help understand better what you do when you're out there and thinking through what you're going to put in your drawing.
Yeah.
Leads to another question. When you are working on site, if you would have been working on site for this specific drawing, would you have added the shadows in? Would you shade them in?
I might do. Depends on the time I have. So yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you can get quite a lot done in half an hour, and then you just, you keep adding to it. Other times I might only get the line work done in half an hour, depending on what it is I'm drawing. And also some days are just faster. I don't know, I seem to draw faster on some days and slower on other days. So it depends. If I'm sitting down, it's slightly easier than when I'm standing up, because when I'm standing up, I'm trying to hold the sketchbook as well, and trying to get out of everyone's way and not get run over and so on. So it does depend. It just depends on what I'm trying to capture. I tend to put the shadow in if it's a lovely sunny day and I've got the sunshine is creating some really lovely deep shadows for me to play with. I think if it's kind of quite a dull day, then I tend, not to focus on the shadow too much and the shading.
Okay. Jane Simpson asks, if you were sketching on location, would you be standing in the street, or do you carry a little stool with you?
Oh, I never carry a little stool. I probably should. I'm usually standing in the street. If I'm on holiday, then I'll try and plan the sketch. I'll do the sketch if we're naturally at a pause point. Maybe we stop for coffee or we stop for lunch or something. Then I'll get the sketchbook out and I'll do something then. But if I'm just out and about on my own, or perhaps I've just gone on lunch break or something, then I will just stand up. I'll just find a corner tuck myself into a doorway or something like that. Doorways are really good, but it does scare people when they open a door and they see me standing outside. But,
For sure.
yeah.
And
But doorways are quite good because you're out of the way and you sort of you're not getting in the way of pedestrians or cars or anything like that. So mostly standing.
okay, so you don't lean your sketchbook on anything?
No, and this is another reason why the little A6 sketchbook is quite good, because it's so small, I can hold it quite easily. I do sketch with this size as well, but it's sometimes gets quite heavy to hold if I'm doing it for a long time, and I tend to try and probably save the bigger sketchbook for when I'm sitting down. Sometimes I'm just sitting on a curb.
Fair, makes sense. So what supplies do you take with you when you go out and sketch?
When I'm outside, I only take 2 pens. I take the same as today, so I'll take a thin, probably a 0.2 type pen, and then I'll take a thicker one, and it's not always a chisel tip, it's just a thicker nib that I can start to get blacks in, and that's it. I like to travel light.
Okay.
So, always just 2 pens and a sketchbook.
And we have a couple more questions. Leslie is asking, do you think it's important to include people in a scene?
Not always. I like to do it if I'm out and about in a busy place, because I think it adds to the atmosphere. It conveys that kind of urban scene that I'm usually capturing. And I do think, I mean, it was one of the things that I learned when I started my career in design, that it really helps bring life to a scene, adding people. So I think it's something I've carried through from, when I first started working.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for sharing. We'll end the demo with this one question, but before, I would like to thank everyone for joining us and remind you all to please, if you can, take a chance to fill out our feedback survey. It takes about 30 seconds, and we really appreciate you letting us know what you enjoyed and how we can improve so that we can continue to bring you content that you enjoy. And don't forget to save your spot for Siu-Lan's mini workshop on September 4th. The links are both in the chat. And a lot of people are saying that this was great. Great job, Siu-Lan. Thank you. So, last question. From Vivian, how do you learn to loosen up when sketching?
I didn't actually do it today, but it's quite good to do some warm-ups. So you just scribble, what we call mark making. Just you could be doing anything. You don't need to be drawing something specific. So warm up, just use your hands to kind of draw anything you want. And also, I find what really helps me is putting a time limit on things. So if I'm out and about, I might just set myself a half-hour time slot. I'll actually put it on my stopwatch, and it helps me concentrate, and it helps me not dwell too long on any one detail, because I know I've got half an hour. This is what I want to capture. And so what are the most important things that I need to capture, based on the fact that I've got to work very quickly. So I work on that basis quite a lot. I set myself time limits, and I know that that way, if I've spent too much time doing it, I've already got perhaps a window or a door and I haven't captured the whole scene. So it's something that I do to try and move myself along and keep myself alert. So but it's a strange thing, because I say alert, but I'm still very much in a kind of calm zone. I think it helps put me into that calm zone of knowing what I'm doing as I'm drawing, and then I'm sort of in my own little world as I do it, and so I tend to work faster in that way as well.
Okay.
It might not work for everybody.
And that's true. I mean, y'all understand or learn things in different ways. So overall, I think in the end, you got to find what works best for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's great that we can learn
Worth a
from
try.
artists like you and try it out, see if your technique, your tips and tricks work for us. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully we see you in Siu-Lan's mini workshop and in our future demos.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Noelia. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, y'all.
Bye.